I will also ask the teams to see if your colleagues are here, so we can begin to start, and also our judges for today's session. I think we have everyone now. So hello everyone and welcome to the Hague Tournament 2021, the Inter-University edition. My name is Miruna and I will be your session supervisor today along with my colleagues, Miss Sofia, who will be the timekeeper, and our colleague Francesco, who is live streaming on YouTube. The session will run for a total of 40 minutes. You'll get notified when there is only 1 minute remaining for the opening speech and 30 seconds remaining for each argument of teams during the rebuttal phase. We'd like to kindly ask everybody in the session to please turn off any additional electronics devices except the device you are using right now to access this session. And please make sure that all other apps and messages are closed. Taking photographs, screenshots or recordings is strictly forbidden with the exception of the tournament's organizing committee. Should you experience prolonged technical difficulties or get disconnected and unable to rejoin the session, the timing will be paused and you should contact a member of the organizing committee, or you can contact me via this chat. We'd like to kindly ask the judges and other teams members to please turn off their camera during the performance of every participant so we can see you clearly. I will now draw the pro and cons position of the two participating cities, the Catholic University of Lille and the Hague University of Applied Sciences. I'll also share my screen so you can see. The first name that will pop up is the one who will be pros, and the second will be contra. The topic for this session is a constitution must be limited to the rights of the citizen. I hope you can see my screen. If yes, yeah, perfect. So for pro will be University of Lille, and for cons, the Hague University of Applied Sciences. Now, I will give you 5 minutes for the two teams to get prepared, and the session shall commence right afterwards. Thank you and good luck. Thank you, Sophie. Those 5 minutes are already gone, so I will give the floor for the first team, the Catholic University of Lille, to introduce their opening speech.
Yes, can you hear me? Thank you. Dear members of the jury, dear opposite team, good evening. My name is Camille Chetiri, and I represent the Catholic University of Lille by arguing for a constitution limited to citizens' rights. In a modern democratic state, the constitution can be defined as a norm placed at the apex of the normative hierarchy of the state of law in accordance with the characterization given by Hans Kelsen. According to the maxim of Abraham Lincoln, democracy is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. This objective is a matter of fact common whether it is in the Article 3 of the Ukrainian Constitution or at the first chapter of the Dutch Constitution or even at the first article of the Brazilian one. The Constitution, in this sense, must be limited to citizens' rights, and a plethora of modern-day constitutions attest to the cynosure of citizens' rights. We will show that through the Constitution should be limited to the right of citizens, the notion of right as a functional approach to it. Show that the provision on the organization of the states are constitutive of citizens' rights. Secondly, so in the same with the theory of balance of power, and lastly, with institutional and participative disposition. So first, the provisions on the organization of the states are constitutive of citizens' rights. Indeed, the Constitution is a means of recognition of the state citizenship and therefore citizens. The Montevideo Convention show that the specification of the conditions of existence of a government, condition of acquisition citizenship, and the geographical limits of its exercise are therefore functional citizens' rights, as it provides for the context means of exercise of the said rights. Secondly, the theory of the balance of power is constitutive of a human rights. Indeed, the key characteristic of a democracy, in accordance with Montesquieu's theory, is a balance of power. As he states, in order to avoid the abuse of power, the disposition of things should allow for a certain power to impede another one. The idea of the balance of power is an effective means to protect citizens' rights. There is ultimately constitutive of a right as it conceals citizens from arbitrary implementation that will be caused by supremacy of one branch over another. For example, this is shown by the CJEU jurisprudence granting November 2019 that deems the lack of independence of the Polish judiciary contrary to citizens' rights that are protected by Article 2 of the TFU. Thirdly, the consecration of institutions corresponds to citizens' rights. Indeed, certain rights, as explained by José Alfonso da Silva, may have full efficacy, meaning they do not need any complementary institution to be exercised, for example, the right to live, while other rights are subject to institutional implementation as they are beyond the capacity of any isolated human individual, for example, the right to justice. Lastly, participative mechanisms also correlate to citizens' rights. For example, the attitude to petition for constitutionally control ensures the supremacy for citizen rights and therefore constitutes such. Also, the constitutional regulation of these mechanisms, although dissenting citizens' electoral freedom to be protected. As it works in these states, the Constitution does not just protect those with view we share, it also protects those with whose view we disagree. In conclusion, because democracy is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, its supreme can only have an identical objective: the consecration, protection, and implementation of citizens' rights. The very notion of citizens' rights is a matter of fact that not limited to a mere catalogue of what one is entitled to, but a functional approach in order to protect and implement what one is entitled to through democratic institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, right on time. Now I'd like to invite the team of the Hague University of Applied Sciences for taking the position to take the floor for their opening statements.
Before I start, I'd like to clarify, can you see me and hear me? Thank you. Good evening. My name is Altamash Khalil, and along with my colleagues Martin Stumpf and Alexandra Sarban, I'll be arguing against the statement, a constitution must be limited to the rights of the citizen. We're going to substantiate our position by expanding on the following points. Firstly, fundamental rights are for everyone and exist independently of one's citizenship status. And secondly, if a foreigner contributes equally to a society as a citizen, they should be entitled to similar rights as a citizen. To avoid any confusion, the definition of citizenship we are using is the standard one. Citizenship is a legal status that creates a relationship between an individual and a state through which that individual receives certain protections, rights, privileges, whilst also conferring obligations upon them. In order to understand why a constitution should not be limited to the rights of the citizens, it is pivotal to look at various examples where a constitution affords rights to everyone. One such example is the United States of America. Aside from the right to vote and the right to run for federal elective office, which, by the way, are not fundamental rights, the US Constitution affords equal rights to everyone, from tourists to even illegal immigrants. The reason behind this is simple. There are certain basic human rights to which all people are entitled, purely by the virtue of their humanity. All this stems from the human rights treaties, which essentially provide that rights are owed to all persons, regardless of their nationality. And its fundamental rights to non-nationals, especially those who have signed and ratified the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, thereby obliging them to fulfill their duties under the treaty. It is necessary to emphasize the importance of non-discrimination that is applicable in this case. Granting citizen exclusive right is discriminatory towards foreign nationals. In the 21st century, a globalized time where traveling and settling in a country other than yours is a natural occurrence, foreign nationals contribute similarly to state society. As an example, foreigners pay the same taxes, they bolster the economy, they even diversify the job market, and generally make a country more prosperous. Article 40 of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights guarantees a citizen of an EU member state the same right to vote and the right to stand for municipal elections in any other member state if they live there. The EU's reasoning is very clear. Why should we discriminate between citizens and non-citizens if the latter contribute similarly and are affected by public policy in the same way? After all, taxation without representation goes against one of the fundamental tenets of a democratic society. In conclusion, dear colleagues, a constitution sets out fundamental principles by which a country is governed. Citizenship can always be dissolved or denied because citizenship is a legal construct, an abstraction, a theory. But personhood is a fact. Hence, it is far more difficult to deny that a human being is a person. When we balance liberty and security, we should respect the equal dignity and basic human rights of all persons, regardless of the title citizen. My learned opposition today already quoted that democracy is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But the true essence of democracy is not how it treats those with political power, but how it treats those who have no voice in the democratic process. Only then will we be able to live up to the ideal of democracy as the self-government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Thank you so very much for listening intently.
Thank you. Now I would like to give the floor for the first argument of Team of Lille. Speaker for the Team of Lille is invited to present their first argument.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Unfortunately, we can't see you yet.
Is it all right now?
The image still no, but if you want, we can proceed with your... Now, yeah, now we can see you.
Thank you, dear opposing team, for your speech. I would like to first start by stating that though the notion of citizenship does not include aliens, the limitation of constitutional rights to the citizens does not limit the entitlement of the rights of aliens. Indeed, the state's objective is first to provide rights to its citizens, but it does not impede a state from protecting alien rights, especially given the modern day relevance of the conventionality bloc, or as others call it, the supralegality bloc. The rights, for example, provided in the European Convention of Human Rights are not only subject to nationals, but to all those that are present in European soil, as the European Court of Human Rights has ruled in several cases, for example, the case of Ireland versus the United Kingdom. So though the notion of citizenship exclude the rights of aliens, it does not impede a state from providing rights to its aliens, and it does not make them any less important, especially given the constitutional relevance of conventional blocks. Therefore, I would like to disagree with the fact that a constitution should contain the rights of aliens, as the rights of aliens could be contained in other sources, especially given the legal relevance of the conventionality block nowadays.
Thank you. Now I will invite the first speaker of the Hague University of Applied Science to proceed with their first
Thank you very
argument.
much. Before I begin, am I audible and visible?
Yes.
Yes, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear colleagues, for the interesting arguments that you have raised in your opening speech. I would like to address the balance of power that has been a very important topic around which the first opening speech was being evolved. Non-citizens constitute as much of the society as citizens, and depriving them of rights that citizens have is inefficient governance. Moving on to the next point that was raised by my colleagues is the geographical limits, which are not relevant because, as my colleague mentioned, we are a globalized society, and thus non-citizens are as much a part of this society as citizens are. I would like to remind my colleagues as well that other nationals and nations in general also recognize that foreign nationals are entitled to the same basic human rights as their own citizens. Some constitutions, some of Sweden's, expressively guarantee equal rights and freedoms to non-nationals. Other constitutions, such as Canada's, guarantee basic human rights to everyone, much like the United States does to persons, and does not do a distinction between citizens and non-citizens. Non-nationals living in the country, as in the Italy's constitution, extends to the fundamental rights, including due process and freedoms such as speech and association to all persons, disregarding the fact that there are citizens or non-citizens. Germany's basic law establishes that human rights and everyone's rights that apply equally to all persons without regard to citizenship. The same thing applies to Great Britain, as an example, that doesn't have a constitution necessarily, but it has recently incorporated the ECHR into its domestic law by statute, and it generally extends to fundamental right protections to all persons without the regard whether they're citizens or non-citizens, which is why it is important to note that human rights and basic rights have to and must extend to all people, again, disregarding. Thank you.
Right on time. I would like to invite the second speaker of our first team, Lille University, to proceed with their second argument.
Thank you. Am I visible and audible? All right. So I would like to start by stating that, as the Montevideo Convention indicates, there are three categories that needs to be examined: the territory, the population, and an effective government. And the population means a distinctive or determinate population, therefore citizenship. Also, I would like to add that it would be inefficient if there were no that citizenship is a precursor to voting rights, therefore it is false that the rights apply equally. And that is it for my argument.
Thank you. We'll proceed with the second argument of the second team, the Hague University of Applied Sciences.
Thank you very much. Again, check whether I'm visible and audible. Yes, lovely. Thank you. Well, both of my colleagues from the other team has mentioned the fact that we indeed live in the modern times, and that is exactly why we must not make the distinction between non-citizens and citizens when it comes to basic human rights. The human rights movement of the last 50 years, which is the modern times, reflects a remarkably parallel secular understanding, namely that there are certain basic human rights to which persons are entitled simply by the virtue of their humanity, which is what the US Constitution says when it comes to persons rather than citizens or non-citizens. So we are all people. Human rights treaties, including those that the United States has signed and ratified, uniformly provide that the rights of due process, political freedoms, and equal protection are owed to all persons regardless of nationality. And that is what we are essentially arguing here for. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to which my colleague has referred, for example, University of Lille has the Magna Carta of contemporary international human rights law. It expressly premises on the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family, which initially says that we're all citizens of the world. Equality requirements of human rights law is very important in this case. States are obliged to have in place effective legislation to fight against all forms of discrimination, as well as the effective remedies to obtain compensation for violations such as legislation incorporated in the Constitution, which is why it is vital, as me and my colleagues have been stating for the past couple of minutes, that there is no distinction in human rights when it comes to citizens and non-citizens, and that has to be incorporated in the Constitution indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to invite the third member of the team of University of Lille to proceed with their third argument and final one.
Yes, I'm not agree with the argument because of the fact that we live in a modern society, give foreign right in the conventional law and legislative norm. Nationally is the constitution to be able to exercise a fundamental aspect of citizenship, and which is to voting rights. You talk about human rights, but you do not respect them by only not admit the fact that the citizen is the signature of a democratic state. By electing the representatives that just express the will and show that they are the pillar of the democracy. That's right, the constitution must be limited to the citizens' right because citizens are the state by themselves. Moreover, citizens are also the majority of the state by the way that they are the only one asked in the case of a referendum. You talk about the balance of power and say that people, but in fact, citizens are the guardian of their own right and decision making. For instance, this is an instrument a lot used in Switzerland. Referendum was lastly introduced about immigration restriction, but failed to pass because citizens vote toward free movement in the EU. It slowly shows all people can have the monopoly of power and all their rights need to be represented within the constitution. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I would like also to invite the last final argument for the first speaker of the Hague University of Applied Science.
Yes, just to clarify, am I audible and visible?
Yes, very clear, Martin.
Okay, great. So to briefly touch on those last points there, my colleague has already explained why there isn't a distinction between citizens and non-citizens in international human rights law, and that in essence, all people must be represented. So in the interest of time, dear colleagues, to conclude our side of the debate, I will recap the arguments that our team has made to support our position, which is that constitutions must not be limited to the rights of the citizens. First of all people, including foreign nationals, are entitled to basic rights, regardless of whether they're citizens or not. To limit an allocation of rights to only citizens of a given jurisdiction, well, that just flies in the face of the idea that some rights that humans enjoy are inalienable, like the right to life or the right to a fair trial. And apart from that, it only makes sense to extend equal rights to non-citizens if they contribute to society similarly and are affected by public policy similarly to how proper citizens are. And this is why jurisdictions like the European Union have extended voting rights to foreign nationals. It's also why the Supreme Court of the United States has affirmed many times in its case law that foreigners must be able to enjoy basic rights alongside citizens. And there are numerous constitutions around the world which guarantee rights for all human beings, as my colleague, Ms. Sarban, has mentioned before. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the matter is quite simple. Constitutions don't only exist to protect citizens, They outline rights which all humans are entitled to. Let us not unfairly discriminate against foreign nationals simply because they hold a different passport. Because how we treat foreign nationals, the paradigmatic other, especially in these times of crisis, ultimately tests our own humanity. Thank you for your attention.
Guillaume, thank you everyone. This was our first session of debate today on the topic a constitution must be limited to the rights of the citizens. We'd like to thank you everybody for being here in this environment online, and also to let you know that the results and the feedback of the judges will be distributed by email after they will be processed by our team and our judges. Thank you very much for all your participations, and do not forget to follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram, to be updated with everything we do. Thank you, and it was nice to see you all. It would be really nice if you could also open your cameras to have a final goodbye. And also, lastly, I would like to thank you for all the members of the organizing team and Mr. Lorange for organizing this debate in these harsh times. Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Good job, both of you.
We didn't have like any feedback as my WhatsApp just crashed and I texted you. No feedback.
Yeah, so two of the